Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my bedroom in the great state of Kansas. And joining me is Bryer from Bryer's Music Showcase from the great state of California. In California, actually a pretty important topic for today, I think. And
Oh
I think
yeah.
it's good that I have a Californian on the channel to talk about
Really?
this
How
group.
so?
Because we're discussing the album Pet Sounds. And even more than that, we're talking about the Beach Boys. Yeah, here's the album, Pet Sounds.
Mine's back
And
there too.
oh, you got that too, yeah, good. And I think a big part of the Beach Boys is California, I would think, right?
Yeah, yeah, I would
They
say
wouldn't be the
so.
Beach Boys. They wouldn't be calling themselves the Beach Boys probably if they're from Kansas,
Yeah, probably
uh,
not.
or Minnesota or something. I don't know. It's like when you think of beaches, you think of California probably, maybe Florida. I don't know, but
Yeah.
there's something about being from California, I'm sure, that kind of helped them create their sound, at least to begin with, and all that, and kind of get into that, anyways. But this is part of my game changer series that I kind of just started. This idea I came up with where I wanted to discuss albums and movies that I think were important and significant when they came out and or changed in the genre they're in, changed music or changed whatever, and was significant that it influenced a lot of people afterwards and made people think differently or make people do things differently when it comes to music and all that. And I felt that Pet Sounds definitely belongs in that category as a game changer. And when you agree, Brian?
Oh yeah, totally. I would definitely agree to that. I feel like it's an album that I think even today, I think people don't quite realize just how important it is. Because because I'll be honest, because there's some videos on YouTube where people react to the full album. Most of them are usually positive, but then there's those couple people who will listen to the album and they think, "Oh, it's okay," but I don't think they really
Yeah.
understood just how groundbreaking it was for the time.
Yes. Good. That's what I've been thinking the same thing. Um, um, and as I say, and Briar, I thought the perfect person to have on here because you're a pretty big fan of this album.
Oh, yeah. This is, like, my number 1 favorite album of all time.
Yeah, this was number one, so I thought good idea to bring you on here to talk about your favorite album of all time. So you've had plenty of time to listen to this album and dissect it, hopefully, in your own mind, I guess, and in some sense, anyways. I guess first off, do you remember when you first maybe listened to this album, or you were aware of this album and discovered like this was like a big album, or
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, of course, like we already established, I'm from California, and so Beach Boys, that's ingrained in your DNA. But and so, of course, I grew up knowing a lot of their big hits,
okay,
a lot of the surf rock stuff, how they started. And of course, I heard songs from Pet Sounds like in passing. But it really wasn't until high school, because high school is when I really was getting into music. By that point, I've already discovered Queen, and I was getting to other bands. And
okay,
the Beach Boys was one of those artists that I've always respected, but yeah, like most people, I didn't really think much of them because of that whole surf rock stereotype they're often associated with. But Pet Sounds usually gets mentioned from time to time, and it was yeah, it was during either my junior year or senior year. I think it was my senior year of high school where I actually went out and I sat down and I listened to the whole album. And I remember even then I knew this was a very special album. And it really helped that, it really spoke to me because I think I'm pretty sure we'll talk more about some of the lyric content on this album, but for me, a lot of the lyrics really
hmm
spoke to me,
yeah,
especially just where I was at that point in time. And then, of course, when you learn more about the history of the album, and just what Brian Wilson did behind the scenes. I mean, to me, I just found it ever more inspiring for someone for creatives like I was and still am to this day. So But yeah, we'll talk more about it. But it was, yeah, it was high school, and I'll always remember when I it was during the time where I've told this story. But of course, I had a one act play I had to direct, and before I actually started that whole project, I was listening to those like those Pet Sound Sessions recordings, and just
Um,
hearing Brian Wilson, because you can find a lot of the sessions on YouTube, and
oh, okay.
You can hear Brian conducting everything, just
Yeah.
instructing everyone, and I just again, that was another thing that really I found extremely inspiring, just see how confident he was on just having everything in his head. That was, like, the mentality I went when it came to directing people and stuff like that. So, again, this album has a very important place to me, and that's why, after all these time, it still holds a big place in my heart.
I should say it's actually getting what, 60th
It's
anniversary
60
or
years
something?
old. Yeah, 60 years old this year.
Yeah. So
Back
it's
in
been
May,
talked
I
about quite a
think.
bit. I feel like on I don't know, did it come out like a month ago? I can't remember because I remember everybody there was this one week where everybody talked about Pet Sounds, and I was like,
Yeah,
oh wow, it's
I
like
think it was a month ago. It turned
yeah,
60.
yeah. So I know there was a big subject on Pet Sounds. Everybody did a YouTube video and all that. So it's I guess a good idea to talk about now, 60 years later. Um, that's interesting. I just thinking like I was reading like Brian Wilson was like 23 when he wrote this album, and that's probably your age now. You're close to the age, I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I was 23. No, I wasn't 23, but I was definitely close to that age when I first heard it.
yeah, so I forget how young he was when he did this album, and I wonder if you're that age, you kind of get. We'll get into that. I know, but I just now just had that thought when you said that. Like, I wonder if that makes a difference when you're young and you hear this album compared to older. Maybe I don't know. Because yeah, the lyrics definitely I think reflect him as age. Maybe uh, I don't know. That's interesting thought. Now I just had, but anyways, um, yeah, for me, I was like thinking about this. I remember, yeah, like when I was growing up, I listened to the oldie station and I heard all the Beach Boys songs because there was a ton of them that were played on the radio. And yeah, so I knew all the songs, but I didn't pay attention to albums at all when I was growing up. That was never a thing. Like I never, the only thing I knew was Beatle albums, and that was pretty much it. But I never ventured to anybody else's albums. And I remember, and if my sister Abby is watching this at all, she can, tell me if this is correct. I remember her buying like Pet Sounds, I think, on an like a record when I was a kid. I mean, like a teenager. I think she bought, but we didn't have a record player, so she had no way to play it. So it was like just, I guess I don't know why, where she got it or why she bought it. Now I don't remember, but I feel like maybe because she was also in the Beatles and she was into 60s music like I was. And I don't know, she must have known that was like a big album. So she bought it, I guess, just to have it. Just go, she has Pet Sounds, I think. Again, she can correct me in the comments at some point if I'm doing this correct. But I remember that's the first time I ever heard of Pet Sounds. And I remember Abby brought this, oh, there's this album, Pet Sounds. And it's like a big, all I knew was my sister Abby was like, this is like a big Beach Boys album, evidently. And I was like, oh, really? And my first thought was Pet Sounds. What a weird name for an album. I don't know why. At the time, I was like, Pet Sounds, really? Like, that's the name? Okay. Of the big album from the Beach Boys. So that's what ingrained in me at the time that there's this that's the only album I knew was there's an album called Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Evidently, it was like it's a big album for them. But I never listened to it. Like I said, I never listened to albums really. I just listened to the radio. And then I remember, and I guess I'll get into this later about like how this album really kind of grew in popularity over time. I think, but it seems like it wasn't until Rolling Stones came out with their 500 greatest albums in the 2000s. They started that whole thing, and Pet Sounds was number two on the list. And that's when you're like, okay, this must be a big album. But out of 500 albums, the greatest albums according to Rolling Stones, which is, I guess you can say, is like the most well-known organization on music, or I don't know what you call it, magazine, whatever, journalism on that we. There's other ones, but Rolling Stones is like one of those that everybody talks. So I was like, wow, Rolling Stones put number two. That's when I was like, wow, this must be. pretty hyped up. Anyways, and then I remember I finally got around to listening to it much later. I feel like not that long ago, I probably finally got around to listening to it because I was like, oh, I have to listen to this album. And so, and again, I only started listening to albums maybe 5 years ago when I started this channel. That's when I finally was like, you know what, I need to actually start listening to albums. Because at the time, all I listened to were, I went on iTunes and bought my favorite songs I heard on the radio and burned them on CDs. So all my CDs were greatest hits CD from each band or whatever. And so I was like, okay, I need to listen to Pet Sounds. I remember I listened to Pet Sounds, and my first thought was, it's not that great. Like, what is everybody? I think it got overhyped in my head. And when I listened to it, I was like, I don't know if it's that big of a deal. Obviously, there's three huge hit songs on the album that I knew and I loved. Everything else, though, I didn't know. I was like, I don't know if it's that great. So I didn't think that much about it. And then later, when I was making my top 100 favorite albums list, I was like, I need to listen to Pet Sounds again. And I listened to it again, and it was like, oh, this is really good. I don't know why it clicked for me at that point. And I think it's mostly just the melodies and the harmonies and all that I love. And you get a lot of that in all the Beach Boys music, and this especially. And I think that's where I was like, wow, I really enjoy, what's even the deep cuts. I was kind of like, wow, this is like really cool. Like, um, and that's when I kind of became, yeah, a big fan of this album. And it was in my top 10. I kind of My last list I put together is it's out of my top 10, but I think it's like in my top 15 favorite albums or something like that. But this easily could be like a number one album for somebody as it is for you. And I totally get it. I was like, yeah, that's a great album. Like 10 out of 10 for sure. Anyway, so that's my history with the album itself, I guess. All right, so before we get to talk about Pet Sounds, I wanted to talk about how did we get here? How did we get to Pet Sounds? Because Pet Sounds is not their first album
No.
um, at all, and they were already a huge band at this point. So I was going to go through a little bit of history on the Beach Boys, kind of get a little more perspective on what makes this album so unique. I think first off, just say Beach Boys. You got the three Wilson brothers: Brian, Carl, Dennis. Brian being the oldest. Then you have cousin Mike Love, and then you had neighbor, I think David Marks, kind of joined them, and you also had a friend Al Jardine that also joined them later on. Became basically the major core of the band, and then also Bruce Johnson also joined later on as well. Kind of would be the other member of this group.
Yeah, he kind of joined around
Anyways,
around roughly before around this time. The album
yeah,
before the album.
yeah, I think because Brian Wilson wasn't. My understanding, I think, is because Brian Wilson wasn't touring anymore, and so he
Yeah,
needs
he had like
somebody.
a he was
So,
yeah, he was going through some mental even at that point, he was going through mental issues,
oh yeah.
and so yeah, so he couldn't tour.
So it was like around and again. As I was reading this, like they're like teenagers. I mean, they're young, kind of young teenagers, and it's around like 61 or so. Anyways, Brian Wilson, he's kind of the catalyst, I think, for the whole band. Of like, he got really into music. He really got into the Four Freshmen, is the band or the group I always hear him talk about, which was big on like four-part harmonies or whatever. And he was really into harmonies. He really wanted that. He really wanted to have a group that does those kind of harmonies that like the Four Freshmen or whatever that he was listening to. And he played piano. Sounds like his dad had some connections to the music business and did some songwriting. I don't know exactly what that means exactly, but there's some connection. Murray Wilson, their dad, had, and I think maybe that's where he learned piano and all. Anyways, but he learned piano basically, and he kind of learned how to arrange music and also to kind of figure out how to do harmonies, basically. And so basically, he got his two brothers, Carl and Dennis, and like I said, Mike Love, of course, family member, and then eventually, David Marks and whatever. He kind of taught them how to do four-part harmony or something like that. He like taught them, like he learned, kind of figured it out or learned it from listening, and that's how we get the. And I think when I think Beach Boys, I think of the harmony, the that like major four-part, like whatever how many part harmony they are. That's really like the sound of the Beach Boys to me, I think, and that's where he gets this idea kind of early on. Um, and roughly, yeah, and so he has piano. Sounds like Carl and David had guitars, so they're like, "Hey, we got guitars. Let's play guitar. Dennis had to learn the drums, I guess, at some point. I don't think he was
Yeah.
originally a drummer,
No.
but he had kind of learned it enough that he could play, I guess. Um, and then Mike, I don't think he ever played an instrument, as far as I know. He just sang, but
Not really. Yeah, he was the singer. He was just a singer.
he was just a singer. Um, and so they kind of started out. He of course, yeah. At some point, they decided, hey, let's write a song about surfing. I guess, and again, I think that's being from California. None of
Yeah,
them
and
were
that was
surfers.
because yeah, the only surfer was Dennis.
Yeah, so it's not like they were major surfers at all or anything. But it's California, I guess. I don't know. So they kind of got this surfing idea, I think, and so he writes a song called "Surfing." Pretty simple, and he makes a demo, and I guess they put it out, I think locally maybe, and it kind of comes on the radio or something, or it comes a hit, and they're like, "Oh wow, it's a hit! Like we didn't see that, we didn't expect that, or something like that." And so through that, they're able to get a record deal. Um, I know at some point it's Capitol. I don't know if that was right away, but they got with Capitol, and they got themselves a record deal. That's kind of how they got into the music business, anyways. Um, Yeah, Captain Record. That's what I read. Okay, so they were able to make their first album, Surf and Safari, 1962, and it went to number 32 on the charts. Um, it was again big on surfing music. Of course, Surf and Safari was kind of their hit song on there, and then Surfing also was on there. Um, it's interesting. Surf music was a thing at the time, but it was mostly instrumental. From
Yeah.
my research, I did. So this is almost a new thing for surf music.
Yeah, it's definitely more like if you look up like actual like surf rock is, like the most time you'll get like a like someone like Dick Dale,
Dick Dale. Yep. Yep.
that very fast guitar strumming, like
Yeah.
very adrenaline building because it's
Yeah.
supposed to capture the feel of riding a wave. But yeah, the Beach
Yeah.
Boys came in and completely did something a little bit more softer if to some, which is why I think even at that time, I think the a lot of, like, actual hardcore surfers kinda were turned off by them. They're like, "Oh, this is just weak stuff." And so
That's what I read. I thought that was interesting.
yeah.
And like, what is this crap? Yeah, it's that surfing music. And me, I'm thinking this is surfing music, like Beach Boys. But I'm like, I
Yeah,
guess it's
nowadays it's kinda they are lumped in the surf rock, but
yeah,
there was a little bit of pushback from hardcore surfers.
yeah. I guess hardcore surfers. I'm just thinking, whoa, dude, what is this? It's not surf music. Um, it seems like a niche market, surf music, but um, it kind of caught on. I mean, there's some other groups that kind of came along after the Beach Boys. I think um, was it Jim and Dan or something like that? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, I don't know if it was major, but you definitely get some more surf music after they got big. Also, most of the songs were originals, which I think was still kind of different at the time. You didn't get a lot of original music. I mean, bands writing their own music at the time. So I think even early on, that was a big deal to Brian Wilson was to, write original music. They did do some covers on that first album, from what I remember. And there's
Yeah.
some funny songs like Ten Little Indians and like Chug a Lug or something. I don't know. It's like, what is this? The original stuff's probably the better stuff on the album. Um, but again, this album, not one of the greatest albums to me, but it kind of gets a foot in the door, I guess you can say,
Mhm.
to what it's going to become. Because their second album, Surfing USA, again, going with the surfing, we're going to see a lot of surfing, kind of the main word we're going to deal with. Uh, this came out in 1963 and reached number two. So, pretty big jump to number two on the charts. And of course, Surfing USA was a huge hit for them, top 10 hit on that album. Probably why it was such a huge hit album in itself, anyways. So that really definitely started skyrocketing into the top with that. And so again, the third album, Surfer Girl, again surfing. Um, it came out in 1963. They came out with three albums in 1963, which I thought was insane. I was like the Beatles did too, but Three? Like, why not just make one really good album? Like, me and Nick always say that. Me and Nick
Gotta
always,
make that money.
when we're listening to this music from this time period, we always get these groups that are like putting out three albums a year, and we're like, why not just put one great album? Like, but that's
Mm.
pretty fast paced. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
So,
Talking about Pet Sounds of the Beach Boys here. But Surfer Girl hits number 7 on the charts, and it has Surfer Girl, of course, Little Deuce Coupe, and In My Room, kind of the big hits off of there. So I feel like In My Room, at least, kind of starting the, Brian Wilson more, what we're going to see later on, Pet Sounds, maybe, of,
yeah, this is when he's starting to take a bit more control in the production side.
yeah, a little more deeper song, maybe a little more introspective, kind of writing song a little different from surfing or cars like we're getting a lot at this time, which are kind of the hit songs that I'm sure I don't know. I'm guessing the company's probably like, keep up the surfing and the car songs because those are making money probably. And
Yeah,
I think Brian Wilson's like, I want to write about other stuff. That's my guess. Um, and I should say Mike Love also wrote a lot of songs too. They're kind of the two main
yeah,
songwriters. Brian Wilson and Mike Love. The Brian Wilson's kind of the arranger. He knows how to arrange music like nobody else, and can make sure you get that Beach Boy harmonies like just perfect. Um, and then their fourth album, Little Deuce Coupe, comes out in 1963. So that's their third album in 1963, and that reaches number 4. So we're talking about 3 straight albums in '63, all top 10. I mean, this is pretty big. And Lil Deuce Coupe, I think that's one that they have songs from other albums. It's a weird album, I think,
yeah.
because it's like, hey, let's put on other songs that we've already done or something. Um, like Lil Deuce
Because
Coupe, it's already
we didn't have time to make any more, so let's add some repeats.
exactly. So it seems like a little bit of a cheat. I don't know, but I feel like you can say by the end of 1963, and I'm sure Brian Wilson would probably say this: the Beach Boys are like the biggest band in America. In just a year of time, they've had so many big hits. Their albums are
And
doing very well,
yeah, very fast too, very fast success.
very fast. Yeah, I was thinking this is pretty quick. And again, they're like teenagers. I think it's crazy. Um, but something happens in 1964, and can you guess what that is, Bryer?
Well, a lot of things happened in '64. Mm,
A certain band comes into view in 1964.
okay, yep. I can
Um,
that's one of them. That's definitely one big one.
a certain invasion by a country that Mike lives in.
Hmm. There's a couple
We
mop
call it
tops coming from across the pond.
yes, we got the British invasion hitting in 1964 with the Beatles coming over in February, and their album Meet the Beatles I think came out in January or something like that, and they had a number 1 hit with I Want to Hold Your Hand. They were the biggest thing coming into America, and they start this whole British invasion thing where a bunch of other bands from Great Britain will come over, and this is a huge moment in music, I would say, in America, because we weren't getting that yet until 1964. They were already big in England in '63, but now they're coming over here. So Beach Boys, number 1 band. Now they got competition. The Beatles are definitely, and Brian Wilson. Every time I see him in interviews, he always talks about how they were the top 2 bands in America or something like that. According to him, was the Beatles and Beach Boys. So um, I'm I'll take him by his word that that's probably true. That it's probably is the Beatles and Beach Boys at the time, and there's other bands coming in too. But the Beach Boys definitely were huge at this time. Beatles kind of taking up the number 1 spot though when they came to America, and so from my research, it kind of feels like surf music was starting to go on its way down once the
Yeah.
British invasion hits. And so this is going to be a couple of major things. Like I said, this is going to cause Brian to one thing, I think it's going to cause him to elevate his music and try to stay in competition with the Beatles and other bands coming in and becoming huge. So it makes him become better, I think, or at least have bigger ambitions, maybe, for the albums that he's putting together. Here I'm talking about Brian Wilson. It's all the Beach Boys, but I'm mostly talking about Brian Wilson because he's kind of the mastermind behind it. It feels like. Um, and also it's changing the music and it's changing the way he's looking at music probably as well, as we'll get into here. Anyway, so I thought that's something to think about, because when we get to 1964 we got their fifth album, Shut Down Volume 2, which reaches number 13, not in the top 10. It's 13, still probably pretty good, but I think the record company was like, "What? Not top 10? Like, what are we doing here?" So I think that was somewhat of a disappointment to them, that it wasn't a top 10 album. Um, but I think it's a great album. You have "Fun, Fun, Fun," which is a top five hit, and "Don't Worry, Baby," which is one of my all-time favorite Beach Boy songs. I absolutely love that song. Another absolutely incredible ballad.
Yeah.
Um,
And again, another kind of showcasing what Brian is going to be coming up later
yes, I think 100%.
because he's now
Uh,
incorporating a lot more of that Phil Spector influence that he was always a big fan of.
that's a yeah, definitely someone we have to talk about. Hey Jackson, talking about Pet Sounds and the Beach Boys here, kind of getting up to that. Um, and so their sixth album, definitely I think a very significant album from one of my researches. It's called All Summer Long. Um, it reaches number 4 on the chart. So again, they're very popular, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. They're doing very well at with all this music. And they have their first number one hit with "I Get Around," which is kind of crazy. I mean, when you see all their songs, I would figure they'd have a ton of number one hits, but it's always funny when you go, really that one, but not this one. Like there's some other songs that should be number ones along the way. But "I Get Around's a good song. I mean, it's another catchy number. um, Now, at this point, Murray Wilson gets fired by the group. Their dad, the manager, who they don't really need. Brian Wilson basically can do it all himself and doesn't. In fact, Murray's probably a hindrance, if anything else. And so I think by all means, we think it's probably a good idea they got rid of him somewhat. He was still in the picture, probably somewhat, but at least they, got him professionally, I guess, out of the out of the studio, hopefully. Um, so the album is produced by Brian Wilson, basically at this point. And he really wanted to, like I said, really raise the quality of the songs, do something different with this album. Um, and so, according to what I'm reading online, it says it contained the band's most complex arrangements and refined vocal performances. It didn't rely on surf songs and car songs. So this is, to me, a turning point for the band, um, all summer long.
Hmm.
This is a precursor, basically, to what we're gonna get with Pet Sounds, um, which I never
Definitely,
thought of
yeah,
before.
yeah. It's I think it's like the a good starting, like, well, not a starting point, but yeah, this is like where it's really starting to become a little bit more prominent than before.
I think the big deal with Brian Wilson kind of taking over at this point, I guess, from Murray Wilson, totally in producing it and everything. And again, I think somewhat he's influenced. I guess I don't know what's a good time to talk about this, but he's obviously very influenced by Phil Spector. Uh, I know the album is the Christmas Gift for You, whatever, that Spector Christmas album was huge, and really the production value on that really influenced um, Brian as far as that goes. Is how to you wanted to sound like that, I think, and I guess like you said, admired maybe how Phil Spector did that. And then he was also kind of influenced by the Beatles, or maybe influenced, not the right word, but at least challenged enough to elevate his own, songwriting and producing and all that, and to try to make something that can compete with the Beatles. So I always
Hmm.
look at I don't know if you think that if there's anything else you can add to that. I think Phil Spector and the Beatles, but there might be more to it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely some of the big ones. Those are, like, the top 2, I think, especially during this time. Because yeah, I mean, if he was always a big Phil Spector fanboy, and then, yeah, like you said, the Beatles, I mean, like, as you mentioned, I mean, the Beatles became the hottest thing in the world in America, and, yeah, Brian always wanted to try and compete with him, um, so that really was what really wanted to push him, and also what really made him want to kind of push it is because, the rest of the band were kind of fine doing all the surf rock
That's what I
stuff.
feel like, yeah.
Yes, I mean, particularly one of them, um, especially the one who's supposed to have love in his name. Um,
A
but
certain
so they
cousin, yeah.
yeah, certain cousin, but yeah, so there's always a pushback with that, and it's gonna become even more prominent as we move along, but yeah, Brian was always that big ambitious guy, he always
Yeah,
had, some kind of arrangement in his head, and he always wanted to let it out, and he always felt like the whole surf rock label always kinda stifled him, always kinda restricted
yeah.
him what he really wanted to do, but yeah, I think it was Spector and the Beatles, like, those are the ones that really wanted him to really push the boundaries more.
Okay, that's my feeling in my research. In fact, I guess I could even said the seventh studio album is a Christmas album, the Beach Boys Christmas album, which I think is very influenced by, like I said, Phil Spector's Christmas for You, I believe it's called. Yeah, Phil Spector's A Christmas Gift for You album. And it had some good songs like Lil Saint Nick, The Man with All the Toys, I think Frosty Snowman, all big songs during Christmas time. And also, I remember we reviewed that album on somebody's channel. Might have been Nick's, I can't remember. And or maybe we were just reviewing Christmas albums from with that. We reviewed that album, I think, and I remember Jacob Martin really being like really impressed by like the production value on that album. And I was like, yeah, I never thought about it. I guess I don't think as highly, or I don't think as much on the production, but I guess seems like that's definitely like I said, Brian Wilson definitely thinking of that at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
know on both the Phil Spector Christmas album, and even on the Beach Boys Christmas album, they literally end very similar, where
did they do that talking to the?
yeah, they're talking to the thing.
I remember Phil Spector doing it. I forgot Brian Wilson did that.
Yep.
Hey, thanks for listening to the album as they're like singing the song. It's like, what?
You're welcome.
You're welcome. um, yeah, so I guess that's the last of the 64. So I mean, three albums in 64. Again, all two of them top 10 basically, or well, maybe not the Christmas album. Christmas album was big for Christmas, but anyways, still doing very well. Um, I guess I'll ask you this, Brian. I've been wanting to ask you this. Uh, Phil Spector. What you hear about Phil Spector is there's a word that I always hear: wall of sound.
Okay, yep.
Do you have? I have a hard time understanding what that means. Do you have
But
any idea of how to explain that at all? Because I keep hearing
so
that phrase, wall of sound.
yeah, so I mean, I know the basic of it. Like, I'm no producer, so I don't know exactly how they do it.
Yeah,
But from what I gather, I'm sure there's people going to correct me. But it's supposed to because if you compare a Phil Spector record to, like, another average single at that time, you notice there is a difference in sound quality. Like, with Phil's recordings, like, everything sounds much fuller, like, especially records like, if you compare an Elvis record, for one, usually those are
yeah.
played live. Everything sounds very dry,
Okay.
not much bottom end. But with a Phil Spector, everything just sounds bigger. Like, everything just sounds more elevated, and you can hear almost every instrument clearly. Well, before everything was kind of more muddled, depending
Okay.
on how you mic'd it. But again, I'm not sure exactly how they do it. I'm pretty sure I looked it up one time, um, but again, it's one of those things like you just kind of you hear you
Yeah.
just hear a song that like a Ronette song or something like that. Like, there's just a vibe to it that's definitely was different from everything else.
because that's what Phil Spector's kind of known for. What everybody thinks of Phil Spector is like, and why he's probably one of the most, I don't know how I should say, well-known, famous producers of all time. Like everybody knows. I except that I do know Phil Spector's name because he like murdered his wife or something. But
Yeah.
that kind of that's probably why I know his name as well. But but I think
Mm.
even before that, he was famous for his production value because he'd go on to do Let It Be and Imagine. I know he also and a bunch of other big records later on.
Okay, so I
Um,
did. I quickly Googled up Wall of Sound. So basically, what I get. So it's basically it achieves a dense orchestral and booming sound by layering multiple instruments. So they would
okay, so it's layering.
yeah, layering stuff like that, which again, Brian did a lot of that. And
Yes,
it also utilizes room acoustics and heavily applying tape echo to produce a unified sonic landscape.
yeah, I read that kind of stuff. I'm like, what? Tape echo? I'm like,
Yeah, because there's you can tell there's like a little echo with most everything.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I definitely get the layering. That makes sense. It's probably is that's what makes kind of the wall sound. Maybe is the
Hmm.
definitely. I'm guessing he probably spends more time in the studio than most people. Maybe didn't spend that much time in the studio, and Phil was
Yeah. Again, everything was all
like,
about just like, okay, just record it quick. Let's go. Let's do it so we can get
yeah,
it, pump it out.
yeah. Well, he's like, let's add this to it. Let's do this. Let's do,
Hmm.
and make the different sound anyway. So, but anyways, I thought it was interesting to kind of discuss because I think it's a big part of what we're gonna get to with Brian Wilson and Pet Sounds and all that is the wall sound. So we're getting to 1965. This is also a pretty big year that significant. I don't know for Brian because this is as you mentioned, he has a panic attack while on an airplane. I don't know if they're on tour
Yeah, the
and he's
touring.
been on before, but I don't know. He just had this like panic attack and like freaked out. And after that, he decided he just can't. And maybe I don't know if it's just the stress of he has so much on his shoulders, maybe of like
Yeah,
writing the songs
I
and
think that was definitely the big one. The big factor was the stress he was
yeah,
dealing with.
yeah. So
And even back then, I think even back then he was never a fan of touring, even to begin
okay,
with.
that makes sense. He's more want to be in the studio probably and
Yeah,
work on the music. Maybe he's more on the music part than the touring part.
yeah,
Um, but touring's a big part at this time, as it probably still is. I don't know if you make most of your money on touring or, but it's a big part of being a band or being an artist is getting out there and playing in front of their fans. So, of course, Beatles would like do the very weird thing and say, "Hey, we're not going to tour anymore," which is like what? Like I don't know if anybody else did that. Usually, it's like you need a tour. So yeah, so this is a big setback kind of for. I mean, I'd say it would be a bit setback because it's like you need Brian Wilson, um, and now he's not touring anymore. But they do find a replacement, Glenn Campbell, for a little bit, which is kind of funny to think of. Glenn Campbell kind of up there playing bass, one of the great musicians of all time, and become a great solo artist himself. I guess that's why he had to quit the group. I think because he was already getting to solo work, and then Bruce Johnson kind of comes in, like we said, from what I understand. It said like Bruce
yeah,
Johnson was like a producer, so I'm always like, I
yeah. He
was
was already a songwriter about this point.
uh, I don't know. It's like, hey, George Martin, let's join the Beatles. We need we need another player, and it's like I always thought they're just producers, but I forget that they're probably musicians themselves and all that. Um, so when we get to the eighth studio album, The Beach Boys Today, which is an album we've talked about, we both really like that album as well. Um, this comes out in '65 and it reaches number 4. And it has hits with When I Grew Up to Be a Man, Dance, 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 and Do You Want to Dance were all hit songs. But this really is where we're getting to Pet Sounds area with this album, even more, I think. Uh, from what my research, it says it was a departure from their previous work with an or, orchestral sound intimate subject, and away again from the surf and car songs and more deep subject matter. I think, especially with "I Grew Up to Be a Man," is like one of my favorites because writing it, and I think if I remember from the documentary, Murray Wilson would say to Brian, if you know, when you grow up to be a man, as like a derogatory thing to say to Brian, because Murray was a big jerk. And I think Brian took that and like wrote this song, this really great song out of this thing, about growing up to be a man. Um, Brian was writing from a more vulnerable place at this time, I guess. And that's what we're kind of get to when we get to Pet Sounds. And I think what makes it so unique at this moment is Brian's very vulnerable ability to write.
Mhm.
And that's definitely gonna be a big part of Pet Sounds. And like I said, we got that with In My Room, Don't Worry Baby, You Wanna Grow Up to Be a Man. And yeah, a great album, anyways. And when we get to the ninth studio album, Summer Days and Summer Nights, the from what I've I've read, the studio was like, hey, can we go back to surf songs and car songs? Like, because that's where we get the hits, like we need to get back to that. So it felt like this was almost a step back in a sense. Not in quality maybe, but in
Yeah,
what
I
Brian
think
Wilson
I mean
wanted to do.
yeah, I mean, I think yeah, subject-wise, in terms of the lyrics, yeah, they had to go back to that surfy sort of summer thing, but Brian still put a lot of work into production. So, in terms of lyric
Yeah,
content, maybe, yeah, it could have been it's kind of a step down because yeah, California Girls, I mean, that sounds like something they would write back then.
yeah,
But the production of California Girls, it still has a lot of those
yeah.
traits that we're gonna see even we have been seeing for a little bit here at this point.
Yeah, California Girls is one of their best songs. I mean, I
Yeah.
love that song. In fact, when I was doing this, I thought, when's California Girls coming into play? Because I was like, I didn't realize it came that not late, but kind of came. I thought that it definitely was one of their early hits, but I didn't realize it was so close to Pet Sounds that hit song. Um, and what's even crazier to me is that it wasn't number one; it was number three. I was like, how's this not number one song? Still big hit. Also, Help Me Rhonda becomes their second number one hit. So yeah, two huge hits there with Help Me Rhonda and California Girls on that album. And then the 10th Street album, it's not much to say. It's this really throwaway album. It does reach number six on the charts though. Still does well. You have kind of one hit with Barbara Ann, kind of comes
Yeah.
a hit with
And
it.
it's kinda like a
Um,
fake live album
it's a
almost.
fake live album. It sounds like you're at a party and
Yeah.
someone has a guitar and they're starting to sing songs or something. I don't know. It's
Y Yep. You can tell they just wanted the record out.
yeah. Well, it sounds like they were pressured to put an album out at Christmas time,
Yeah.
so that's what they put out. Like, oh, we got to get a Christmas album out, or I mean, a album
Or
out for
something
Christmas.
for the holiday,
We need to
something
get
for
something
people to
out during the
buy.
holidays, and came up with this anyways. So yeah, not much to say about that album. Um, but okay, now I know I went through a lot of that, but I think it's important to go through all that to go. All right, now we're getting to their 11th album, Pet Sounds, which is so crazy to go from 62 to 66, 4 year span, let's say, they put out 10 albums.
Yep.
That's insane.
And we're shocked that Brian got a panic attack.
Exactly. I mean, Adele puts an album out every 7 years or something. I don't know. It's like get on the ball. Come on. Like Beach Boys put out 10 and four. Uh, yeah, it's just crazy to me. But all right, so now we're getting to Pet Sounds and talking about how I think this is significant. And again, this is Brian Wilson coming. I guess I should say again, Phil Spector. Also, the Beatles put out Rubber Soul, and Rubber Soul, huge hit album, and another album I'm going to talk about on this channel at some point as another game changer. And it was a game changer to Brian Wilson because Brian Wilson heard that, and at least according to him, it was like there's no filler song, and that was somewhat uh, revolutionary, I guess, at the time. because the albums were mostly single driven on the singles, I guess,
Yeah.
and not really thought of. I guess to me, I think of it as albums weren't thought of as like an art form. Like
Yeah.
uh, we're going to put a whole album together, and this is going to say something
Right.
about us at this time, I guess, or whatever. And it's mostly about let's get a couple hit songs on there, and then we'll fill it with whatever. And that was kind of the way most albums were. And then the Beatles kind of changed that a little bit with, at least from what I'm reading about Rubber Soul, where it's like, yeah, it's a full album of different styles of music, I think, and all works together and flows together, I
Yeah.
guess. And that's why Brian Wilson saw it, and he was like, "Whoa!" Like, and it kind of inspired him to go, I want to make something like that. Like, I want to create, and he basically said, I want to create the greatest album of all time. And that was his, again, very ambitious. And again, he's not touring, he's in the studio. So he has a lot of time to now kind of put together this album that we're going to talk about, Pet Sounds. Um, and again, we're coming to 1966 now. Um, and so, I'll just say about the album, it does hit number 10 on the charts, which is still top 10, but yes, I think some see it as almost a disappointment, only reaching 10. And I'm like, 10's still pretty good, but they're used to getting even bigger than that at the time.
Hmm.
And as we know, it does have Sloop John B, Wouldn't Be Nice, and Golly Knows, kind of the big hit songs on that album. Um, um, what's interesting about this album is he picks a different songwriter to help him with this album, a guy named Tony Asher, who, from what I read, is a jingle writer, I guess.
Yeah.
He meets him, and I'm guessing it's because usually Mike Love was the main songwriter. But I'm guessing because the other Beach Boys were out touring, maybe he didn't have Mike Love around, or maybe he wanted
Hmm.
something different. He was trying to come up with something different, maybe.
Yeah, it was kind of a
And
mixture
so,
of both. Yeah, Mike was out, and so, but and of course, like we mentioned, Brian really wanted to dive into more different subject matters, and he just
yeah,
stumbled upon Tony's lyrics, and he just really liked how he
mhm.
worded things, and so yeah, he just invited him on.
And as far as I know, this is the only time he's ever had Tony Asher write on,
Yeah,
on a Beach
pretty
Boys album. So
much.
it was this kind of weird thing where it's like he gets this random person, it seems like, and I don't know if Tony Asher ever did anything after this either, but he brings him in. I mean, like I said, he was a jingle writer, I guess, so he knew how to write. But he brings him in to kind of, I guess. But it feels like this is a Brian Wilson album, and I'm questionable about how much Tony Asher actually helped out. I get
I
different
mean,
reports about
yeah,
how much he helped.
the way I see it, I think Brian would had the ideas, like, he would, like, have, like, a
Yeah,
basic structure of the
yeah,
lyrics, and then Tony would kind of help, like, structure it, like, move things around to make it flow better, and then he'll add
okay,
a couple of
yeah.
other lines in here and there to kinda make it more cohesive, so I that's kinda, like, how I think of it, how the writing partnership were.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. That's probably an accurate, like, how it kinda worked, 'cause it feels like it's Brian Wilson songs, but yeah, Tony Asher, I guess, yeah, just worked on the changing things maybe or coming up with ideas of what lyrics to put in there. And see, seems like if I listen to Brian Wilson or somebody from the Beach Boys, it feels like Tony Asher didn't do much. It was mostly Brian Wilson. But if I listen to Tony Asher, he says like, "Oh, I was significant on like 3 of the songs. I wrote a lot about it." And
Yeah, and you hear stories that, that Tony was involved because, of course, Mike had a problem with one of the lyrics Tony wrote on a certain song. 'Cause it
yes, I
alluded
remember reading
to
something about
it
that.
because it alluded to a certain substance.
Okay, I kind of remember reading something about Mike Love being unhappy about something that was written, but I couldn't remember what it was. So okay. Um, I would guess that Mike Love was probably not very happy because he was like, "Hey, I'm the songwriter.
Yeah,
How
it
come
was
you brought
that's
in this other guy?"
yeah, this brings in the whole Mike Love is the villain, one of the villains of the Beach Boys story, because it is pretty well documented that he really didn't get Pet Sounds in general. I mean, he still kind of when he came back from touring, he did help out a little bit on the lyrics, um, But I'm kind of a but I do agree, but well, my own headcanon is that, yeah, Mike might have helped a little bit in some of the lyrics, like, maybe he changed a few words, but to me, the whole album still feels it's mostly Brian and then Tony. Like, that's what I tended to feel. But yeah, of course, yeah, Mike Love, he still went along with it. He was like, "Okay, let's just do it so Brian can get this off his chest," and then that's basically his mentality throughout the entire thing.
Well, see, again, I mean, I hear different reports, and like I don't know what the truth is because I feel like I'll read something like, yeah, Mike Love and Carl really were unhappy with the album or something like that. But then I read reports saying, oh no, they really were for the album and they approved of it. I don't know. So it's like I don't know. I hear different things, and it's
Yeah.
one of those things
It's
where you
hard
just
yeah,
never know.
it's hard to it's really when you have so many voices, it's hard to pinpoint who is really telling the truth.
I agree.
Honestly, I don't really trust Mike's word at all,
Well, I don't know
personally,
if I
but
trust Brian's word either because he kind of went, he had some major mental issues.
yeah. I mean, especially towards the end. But I mean, I tend to listen to more like Al Jardine.
Yeah,
Like, he
yeah.
seems like
He might be more.
the most
He seems more
level-headed.
level-headed. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I know Al said he was pretty on board with it, and I heard that even Dennis was probably the biggest supporter of it.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's always been well documented that Dennis really looked up to Brian, and so when he saw Brian was so excited about this new project, like, Dennis
Mhm.
was fully on board with it.
That makes sense. I can't say I heard a lot about Dennis being, yeah, unhappy. It felt like it was Mike Love and Carl, but that I read, anyways. Um, so to talk about the album a little bit, um, again, I'm coming off of things my research here. I'm reading off my notes here. But according to what I'm reading, it says the album blended pop, jazz, classical, and avant-garde elements, and was very experimental for the time. Again, he's putting together his own wall sound, putting out different instruments and different sounds that weren't used as usual. Um, Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. um, okay, so one of the things we talk about is very. I think one of the things why we talk about this album as being significant is their experimentation in the studio was something different.
Mhm.
Because we're talking about 1966. I mean, uh, this would maybe be more in the 70s or something like that. I don't know, or in the late 60s when we get more psychedelic and stuff like that, and we do more. But this definitely was. It's hard because I'm looking at from the future. I'm sure it was something. If I was in 1966 and the Pet Sounds came out, I'm sure it was different. It's hard to say right now
Yeah,
because I'm looking at
and I
through retrospectively. But
yeah, and also the thing, to really truly grasp of how different it was, um, I mean, this is where you kinda have to know music theory, because if you I've seen videos really break
that's my
down
problem.
some of the songs, and they talk about just what was no big thing was groundbreaking was how the songs are structured, and just the chords that Brian chose were very unusual for
Right.
the time, going from one
Yeah.
thing to the next, which brings me to another pretty different sort of production that Brian utilized around this time, and that was known as module recording.
Okay.
And basically what that is that, Brian, you would probably let's say Brian comes up with a melody, like he has like a very like a 30-second sort of melody. And then he'll kind of take a break from it. He'll kind of leave it to the side. Then he'll come up with a different melody, and then he'll write compose that, and then so now he has different melodies. And so what he would do sometimes, thinks if he thinks he can do it, he'll just force them together to make
Okay.
something completely
Interesting.
different. Like a good example is probably in God Only Knows, where you have the main melody, but then at some point it switches like abruptly, like if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It
that's
does
an
kind
example
of.
of that. That's an example of that. We gone from one. main melody, but then in the bridge we go to something almost completely different. But yet it still somehow works, which was definitely
That's
another
interesting.
thing
I
that was
didn't
kind
read
of
about that.
different at the time.
Okay.
Like, I mean, probably the biggest example of that would be Good Vibrations with all the twists and turns that goes
Yeah.
into. That's like the epitome of the module recording that
That's a
Bryan
fit.
did.
Yeah, and that comes out. I don't know if it came out right this time or right after this
It's a little bit.
time,
I think it was a little bit after.
because it didn't came on this album, of course.
Yeah,
Which
it
is
was
too
gonna
bad.
be
I
on the.
would
It
love
was gonna
to
be on the proposed next album, but we
smile.
know what happens
Yeah,
there.
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, because it feels like Good Vibrations kind of fits in with this album, I guess, like you said, with all the experimentation and stuff like they're doing. Um, this is an interesting thing. Well, yeah. So sorry, so many things to talk about, but well, I guess I'll talk about this. One of the things is the usual instrumentation on this album. What I think is interesting to talk about. And here's a list of things that he uses on this album: ukulele, sleigh bells, accordion, French horns, timpani, vibraphone. Some of these things I don't know what they are, but vibraphone, bass harmonica, bass clarinet, bongos, glockenspiel, banjo, bicycle horn, Coca-Cola cans, and theremin,
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 yeah,
theremin. Uh, yeah, that's kind of a crazy group of like, instruments uh, and non-instruments that he was using just to get the sound he wanted. I
yeah.
guess that was in his head of what he wanted to do.
And also, got to
uh,
shout out the Wrecking Crew, who were big
yes.
contributors on this album.
Um, yeah, part of my note says that this is the first time that he exclusively used the Wrecking Crew and not really the other Beach Boys, which I think was different. Again, I think Beach Boys were out touring
Yeah,
and they didn't put very much, as far as I know, they didn't do much instrumentation on the album. It was the Wrecking Crew, whatever. They did
yeah,
sing, of course. They used the
yeah. They
harmonies
sung, and
and we got
I think
together.
Carl played the little guitar on it.
Okay, played a little guitar on it, which I'm sure that's very unusual for the other groups. Like, the band members are like, "What the heck? We're supposed to be playing. We're the Beach Boys. This isn't the Beach Boys." uh, but of course, the Wrecking Crew, the session musicians are really good musicians. That's why they're session musicians. They're better than normal musicians, probably, and so it probably
Well, they were
helps.
almost
Maybe
sought after.
yes, and so I'm sure it helped Brian Wilson get the sound he wanted because he had these
Yeah,
super musicians in there, maybe that he couldn't get out of the regular band. I don't
yeah.
know,
I think it's part of it.
and I don't know that the band was really that great musically. They're
They were
probably okay.
fine. They
They're
were good for
fine.
what they were good for what they needed to do.
Yeah, they're no like Led Zeppelin or anything, but they're fine.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure.
mean, it's kind of harsh, but you're not going to see Carl Wilson in top 100 best guitar players,
No, exactly. That's what I was
or
thinking.
Dennis in best drummers.
No,
Although he's had some good drum. I mean, he's a good. I mean, Dennis was a solid drummer, but
yeah,
but yeah, not. But yeah, he's not going to be like. Not many people will say he's their favorite drummer.
no. um, it also says he frequently used doubling, which again I didn't know what this was, so I had to look it up. But basically using different instruments to play the same
Yeah,
melody or whatever,
yeah,
which I guess wasn't used as much at this time, except for bass and I think guitar. That from my research was like sometimes maybe the bass would double the guitar or something like that. That was the only time he really did doubling in rock music. But in this, he took and he had like violins and all kinds of horns and stuff like that. And so he's really big on taking two instruments and doubling the sound or something like that, which I think is interesting. Also, something I read, I thought this is. I'd like to get your what you think about this because I never thought about this until I was reading it. But this is considered by many to be a concept album. And I never really
yeah.
thought of it as a concept album. I don't know. Did you ever think of this as a concept album?
Um, See, this is where it gets tricky because when you say concept album, that can mean many different things.
Okay.
Like there's probably when concept albums, one concept album is it tells a complete story, which not really much of a thing at this point yet. That's not really
No.
till Tommy, where that became a thing. Um, some people say Sergeant Pepper's a concept album, even though
I was
there's no
gonna say
underlying story.
Sergeant Pepper kind of gets influenced by this maybe and tries to be a
Yeah,
concept album as well.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I think what they mean by that is the fact that story wise, it's not there's not like a story concept, but I think in terms of themes or just how the tone of the album just kind of carries over into the entirety of the album. Um, because I guess we can kind of talk about the lyrics because lyrically, it takes everything that we've hinted at, but here they're in full display. Like Brian's like kind of by this. I mean, it comes saying at this point again mentally he was not in the greatest shape.
yeah,
So he was
yeah.
really there. He had moments of
He's
depression,
struggling.
yeah, depression, and then there are
Yeah,
times he felt like he was completely out of place. He felt alienated from everybody because everyone's doing one thing and yet he feels like he's just by himself. You know, songs like, you know, songs that kind of demonstrate this sort of melancholic feel. You know, like That's Not Me and I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, like Caroline No, like all the kind of showcasing that sort of insecurity and that
yeah,
depression. But it still shows, but the other thing that juxtaposes it is the fact that Brian still has a little bit of that innocent quality, and that's always been a key thing with his lyrics or with his concepts. Like there's still innocent value to them, like something like "Wouldn't It Be Nice," which is just this very, it's just a love song, but it's probably the most joyful yet innocent sounding love song to ever that he wanted to do. Um, and then again, God only knows. Again, a good example of just finding love. Just being finding that one person that you can't live without. Um, yeah, so I think just concepts in terms of the feelings and the emotion is,
yeah,
I think, I would say is probably what they mean when they talk about if it is a concept album. I would say it's a very loose concept personally,
right.
but I think tonally, I think it all carries through.
I think this is a very vulnerable album for
Yeah,
Brian, and I think
100%.
that's what makes it so unique. As we're talking about the writing style, as I don't think you quite got that
Not
in
really,
rock
no.
music
Now
at this
most people,
time.
most rock singers don't talk about their feelings.
No, yeah, they don't talk about their feelings exactly.
They just wanna
Yeah, that was very unusual.
get the girl,
Get the
party,
girl
that's
and
it.
yeah, and I think I think about when I was doing research and really thinking about the songs, I was like, wow, they're totally right. Um, I think I said Caroline No was like a song about social isolation or something like that. And I was like, huh, I like Caroline No. I don't think about I just think, wow, I just love the Caroline No. I don't know, it's just a beautiful song. And I think, oh yeah. Yeah, like I said, I just wasn't made for these times. I mean, yeah, definitely struggling with fitting in, I think maybe.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's one of the reasons why I latched onto the album when I got
right.
into it. Was those kind of feelings of isolation and alienation, especially in high school, where that was very prominent for me. Um, but yeah, this album kinda made me feel like I was not alone.
Yeah, that's why I thought, I wonder if this would speak to younger people. That's what I thought when you said that. I was like, huh, I can kind of see that. You kind of feel that way when you're young. I
Mhm,
think people go through that
mhm.
isolation. Um, what do you say? Like self doubt. I don't know. There's a word I think you said that I thought was very that that kind of said it all. I think was
Or maybe also trying to keep on to that innocence that you don't wanna lose, especially when you're growing up. That's another thing I
yeah,
get from it.
because he's kind of still growing up, I guess, in some sense. Brian,
Yeah,
he's
and
23.
some people will say Brian Wilson never really grew up.
It doesn't seem like it with the mental problems he had.
Mhm, and of course,
Obviously, his
uh, I know it sounds very abrupt. This could be our little module recording, but of course, the other thing that was influencing his mental states was drugs.
drugs. Yeah, LSD
Mhm.
specifically probably ruined him.
Yeah, it helped him create the melodies, but yeah, it destroyed him mentally.
I think that there's, yeah, the stress, the drugs, um,
Expectations.
and I know there was something about he was hearing noises or something in
Yeah,
his
starting to hear
head. There's
voices.
hearing voices, so there's something, yeah, going on there that caused all that, I think. And yeah, as we know, after this album, he kind of goes through a mental breakdown, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word to say. And never is the same, it seems like, for the most part. I know there's one, well, we know that his marriage fell apart, I think,
Yeah, his first marriage, yeah.
after this. Um, so that kind of went down. And I know there's one time when he spent almost this whole, I don't know if it was a long time he spent just in bed. Like he never did anything. He just stayed in bed all the time. I mean, so he went through
Mhm.
this depression, I guess. I don't know what you want to say. Uh, he had a lot of mental issues during this time period. Um, so it's kind of
And
not
also
surprising when
the
you listen to the
depression
lyrics.
spurred it gets spurred. Yeah, and also the depression's also kinda spurred to the fact that, Pet Sounds wasn't as big as he wanted it to be.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then he
because you
tried
hear
to,
stories that yeah. Sorry, go on.
and I said, and then he tried to, I think, maybe outdo himself with the next album, and
Yeah,
it was just too
that's
much.
what Smile was supposed to be, but yeah, but then it just didn't happen. It just kinda fell apart after that.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at like "You Still Believe in Me." I think it's an interesting song where he's talking about like I think he's doing all these things, but he's saying this girl still believes in him. I think probably goes that immaturity
Mhm.
maybe of, uh, uh, but yeah, that's not me. Don't talk, put your head on my. Yeah, all these songs are very. uh, I don't know what the word is. You said melancholy, I guess would be maybe the right word to say.
Melancholy, yeah.
Uh, There's not a lot of upbeat songs. Sloop John B, maybe the most upbeat, which is not a song he wrote. Um, the one like cover song on the whole album. Though Sloop John B basically is a beat. It's a Beach Boys song. I mean, nobody knows the original probably.
Yeah, it's like an old
But
folk song, I think.
yeah, an old folk song that Al Jardine put together, I think, or helped put
Yeah,
together.
that he brought it in.
He brought in, yeah.
He showed it to
But yeah,
Brian, and then Brian liked it enough.
there's almost a sadness of this album, I guess, in a sense. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's the right word. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's something. It's not upbeat and cheery like the other Beach Boy albums.
Yeah.
uh, but I love it. That's what makes it great. Yeah, I guess is that listening to it and going, oh man, like, but just the melodies and the harmonies still are so good throughout it. Of course, two of them are instrumentals. I think Pet Sounds was one of them.
Yeah,
Um,
Pet Sounds and also, Let's Go Away for a While.
let's go for a while. Okay, yeah. Which is all Brian Wilson. I guess he pretty much rearranged all that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, one interesting, and as you talked about, like the sessions, like sound like they're kind of crazy. um,
They could be. There I mean, yeah, he
he,
brought in dogs one time.
yeah, probably and dogs. Um, he from what I was reading, they would a lot of these sessions would last 3 hours long, and he would bring all the musicians in, even though he probably didn't need them all at once. He'd have them all there, and financially not the most practical way of doing things because you're paying these people to be there.
No.
And
Yeah.
so I'm sure that was an issue, but again, it was just it felt like what's interesting to me is that Brian Wilson, he didn't like write out the music like like musically, like he didn't know how to write it out like the notes, I think, or whatever, but he knew what he wanted and he was able to say, hey, this is what I want, and then they were able to write it out kind of because the musicians need something to look at or something, to be like, oh, how do I play, what notes am I playing, what, kind of thing. So it's interesting that Brian Wilson wasn't like this, and I feel that, I mean, because and Paul McCartney says the same thing. He doesn't read music, and I think I've heard a lot of musicians go, They don't read music, but yet they create some of the best music of all time. It's like I don't know how that is, but it's just something about
Yeah,
Brian. Just
they just have a really good they just have a really good ear.
yeah, really good ear. Yeah, you're right. That's part of it. And they just have it in their head, and so it must have been something for Brian Wilson to try to get what was in his head into the all these different musicians. Like I said, he's using all these different. And that's why I think he used all these different instruments. Because one of the things I was reading, one of the words I kept coming across, and I had to look it up, is found sounds. I never heard this term before, but found sounds. I was like, found sounds. Evidently, that's like not musical instruments. You're creating sounds out of things that aren't usually used for music. And of course, I read Coca-Cola cans and a sleigh bell, and amongst some other things. So I thought that was interesting. He was again goes to the experimentation of the album, which was very different. Also, a lot of people kind of consider this more of a Brian Wilson album and not a Beach Boys album. Have you heard that?
Yeah, yes, occasionally.
People say this is really a Brian solo album and not a Beach Boys album. I think this goes to how much he put into the album. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if he could have gone and said, "Hey, I'm going to do a solo album," but I don't know. Beach Boys obviously have a
Yeah.
name. They probably would sell more under Beach Boys. It's
Yeah.
probably I'm sure it was what the company would have told them. Um, I think it's something where Wilson really had control over everything, which is somewhat unusual, I think, as
Mhm.
well. Um,
Yeah.
from what I read, it says that Wilson became the first major pop artist to oversee all aspects of the album production. I mean, he was writing the songs, he was arranging the songs, he was in the studio as they're being recorded. I mean, he was a part of everything, which usually you don't see that. I think that's another kind of very interesting thing of what makes it unique. Um, so I always look up like what other people are saying about the album. So I kind of wrote down some things. So I'm gonna read off like some things I researched. Um, Museologist James Perone said that the tempo changes, medical ambiguity, and novel instrumentation timbres distinguishes it from virtually anything else in 1966 pop music. Again, a lot of technical terms I don't understand. So that's why I read it from somebody
That's
else.
how
And I
all
go, somebody
critics
else.
speak.
Exactly. So I'm like, somebody said it. Sounds pretty smart. um, Someone said that Pet Sounds elevated studio artistry amongst West Coast artists. They even go as far as say hip hop is influenced by this album. I don't know if
I
that's true,
mean
but
I
they
mean,
go into
it's
like
it's I guess a little bit, 'cause that's the thing. Pet Sounds really influenced a lot of things that most people take for granted.
exactly. That's what I'm getting at with a lot of, and there were so many quotes. I didn't quote everything I read, but there were just so many quotes that I was like, wow, like everybody really like thought highly of this album. Um, Someone said that it introduced novel orchestration techniques and structural harmonies while also revolutionizing music production through its detail and use of the studio as a composition tool. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Again, goes to how he used the studio more than
Yeah.
the normal.
Using the studio as an instrument.
Yes, using the studio as an instrument. I think it's very interesting the way to say it. It elevated albums as an art form, as I was saying. I think that's
Mhm.
one of the major things. Like I said, the Rubber Soul was doing it. I feel like he heard Rubber Soul and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna do something like that." And he comes out with Pet Sounds,
Yeah, and
and
then, of
then I
course,
think that kind of
Paul McCartney heard Pet Sounds,
yeah.
and then we all
Then
know
he
came out with
yeah,
the certain album.
exactly. I think he was influenced by Pet Sounds and he was like, "I got to do something like that." And then he comes out with Sergeant Pepper's, which is mostly I mean it's Beatles, but it's mostly Paul McCartney kind of with the ideas and stuff behind that album. Um, and I think that changes that people are starting to make albums at this point on more about the album and less about the singles. I think it's a huge turning point in music, I guess.
Mhm.
And I
Oh,
would say
yeah.
this was part of that reason. Would you say?
I would agree, definitely.
Which I'm kind of glad. I was into albums about 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden I got into albums. I was like, man, why didn't I never get into albums? You know, when I was younger. I mean, I did get into some albums in the '90s that were coming out, like Oasis, of course. I've talked about them. What's Storm and Glory, and stuff like that. So I was listening to current albums that were coming out when I was a kid, but I wasn't going back and listening to albums from the '60s and '70s. I was just listening to the music, the singles, and I didn't think about how. Yeah, I guess to me, I was thinking, oh, the singles are only good songs on the album, and I guess it was only until I started listening to albums that I realized, oh, there's other great songs on these albums that you don't know because they're not on the radio. Not all of them are going to be
Mhm.
radio. So you listen to the album, you get bits and pieces of other stuff, and you go, wow, that's really cool. I really like glad I listened to the album and I discovered this other music. You know, so I don't know. I do think albums are kind of an art form in itself in that sense. I guess
Mhm. Yeah.
um, that makes sense. Also, it contributes to synthesizer adoption. So that's again, we're not getting to synthesizer as much at this point. So this was kind of a
No,
new
yeah,
thing
yeah.
because I don't know if that's late '60s into '70s and even the '80s. We're getting the synthesizer music more. Obviously, with
Yeah, it was
the I
like a
know the Who, we
great
get the
progression, yeah.
synthesizer.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of a big thing, getting the synthesizers. Um, yeah, so it contributes to synthesizer adoption, orchestra. Again, a lot of orchestral stuff. Again, he's using orchestra a lot here in pop music, which was unusual, I think. Psychedelia, soft rock, and progressive rock. So a lot of everything I'm reading, it seems like he influences all different kind of rock genres, like even psychedelic. I didn't really see a lot of psychedelic, but I see a lot of. It says that it was influenced. It influenced psychedelic music, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of an
Um,
it's not I wouldn't say it's a full-blown psychedelic album, but there's, like, undertones of it.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, I guess. I never thought of it that way, but I thought that was interesting. Um, I think mostly soft
I
rock
mean,
is
there's a song
definitely
called "I Know There's an Answer," which was originally a drug song.
okay. So you get some drug music, in other words.
Mhm,
I mean, I think definitely soft rock is definitely a huge influence on and pop music.
mhm.
Um, Historian John Robert Greene credits God Only Knows with redefining the popular love song. I thought that was interesting. That is a different song. It's not because the very first lyrics uh, isn't the most like loving lyrics, if I remember right. I'm trying to think now.
Yeah.
I
"I
may
may
not
not
always
always
love
love
you.
you."
I think it's the first
Yeah.
words. I may not always love you.
Yeah.
It's like, huh.
Yeah, but then it kinda follows up with, "But as long as there's stars above you." And then it just gets more and then by
Yes.
the time you get to the chorus, you're like, "Oh, wow, that's very sweet."
It is a very yeah, sweet song. I mean, I'll just come out and say it's my favorite Beach Boys song.
Same
And
here.
yeah, and it's in my top 10 like favorite songs of all time. I mean, that song is amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
Just on
Paul
itself.
McCartney has said it's the best song ever written.
Yes, I wrote that down in my notes. Paul McCartney said that. Let me see if I can find it. Um, but yeah, he says that's his favorite song of all time, and he basically influenced him to write "Here, There, and Everywhere" as well. But I thought this was interesting. Paul McCartney declared that no one is educated musically till they've heard this album, and he contributes Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with being influenced by Pet Sounds. And
Mhm.
even George Martin said that without Pet Sounds, there's no Sergeant Pepper's. I thought that was kind of cool. It's like, yeah, that's huge influence on the Beatles and making one of the biggest albums. Sergeant Pepper's, of course, is considered one of the big albums as well. Um, but yeah, I'm with Paul McCartney. It's one of the greatest songs ever. um, yeah, it's just lyrically, it's so cool. I just love the lyrics of it. Yeah, as long as there's stars above you. Yeah, and just God only knows what I do without you. I don't know. It's just something really cool about the
And
wording of
also
that.
yeah, and also, I mean, there was also pushback of using the word God in the title.
I read that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that, but they're like, you shouldn't use God in the title. That was unusual, I guess. And I was like, what? Like, not bad.
Yeah.
The way he uses it. Yeah, that was weird. I thought.
Yeah, but,
Um,
it's just more impactful with God in the title. I once funny enough, I once watched like, a cover of the song, and it's played the song completely straight, but then they I forgot. Oh, man, they said, "Lord only knows how mu what would I be
really,
without you." I remember hearing that like, "Man, that sounds lame." They just replaced God with Lord.
why?
I don't 'cause they said so I think it's in their description that says, "Oh, God using God's kinda blasphemous." I'm like, "Oh, come on."
It's the same thing,
Mhm.
right? Lord God. I don't
Yeah, but it just sounds lamer that
know.
way. Like God, like, there's more weight to that, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, that's a better word for it. I think it flows better.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Let's see. Composer Philip Glass, which as a composer I've heard because I used to be in band and we played a
Mhm.
lot of Philip Glass music, so I always thought he was a really cool composer. But Philip Glass says the album's structural innovation, incorporation of classical elements and arrangements, and novel production concepts clarified its status as defining work of its era. So that's coming from big time composer. Uh, John Cale calls it adult and childlike at the same time. And
Yeah.
John Cale, he's what was I reading? He was
John Cale? Oh, yeah, he was in the
oh
Velvet
Velvet and
Underground.
Underground. Yeah, Velvet and
Yeah.
Underground. That's it. That's where he came from. So I was like, oh, okay. um, Music journalist Tim Sommer says the album was unprecedented in creating a full length album that could not be replicated or typically a 4 or 5 member group. I think that's interesting. That's another thing I was thinking about. Most albums you make are for songs that you can play live. uh, you go on tour and you play the songs,
Mhm.
and we're getting to a point with this album, I think, where you're getting songs where because of how much he's putting in the studio, you can't play this like this live, or it becomes much harder to
Yeah.
try to play these songs live.
I mean, they could. I mean, they would play some of these songs live, like, probably the big ones were God Only Knows and Wouldn't It Be Nice?
Snoop
But,
John
yeah,
D
but
probably, yeah.
Sloop John G, yeah, they would play that too. But, yeah, you're not gonna get the full, like, soundscape live.
Yes, you're gonna get the soundscape exactly, which I think that's interesting because that is kind of a shift in music at this time period. Because the Beatles did the same thing with Revolver and Sergeant Pepper's. Like he's like, okay, these are harder songs to try to play live. In fact, they didn't play any of these songs live. I think at the time. Now they can because we got all different things we can do to try to make it sound like our
Close to
technology
the
has gotten to a
record.
point where we can replicate a lot of sounds. But I think that's interesting idea in music is we're focusing on the studio more than live, which I think is different for music at this time. I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, the record's orchestration techniques are widely emulated by producers. So again, the orchestration is very influenced by other producers in the future. All kind of use this album. Again, they probably all. It's like this one of these albums where you have to listen to this album. Everybody comes after this album. It's like, yeah, you have to listen to this album. Um, Historian Bob Stanley identifies Pet Sounds as foundational to soft rock for the instrumentation, found sounds. Again, I said found sounds, and avoidance of traditional rock dynamics. Um, I thought that was interesting. Avoidance of tradition. So it's not doing the usual thing, I guess, but doing
Yeah,
unusual
yeah.
experimentation again, I guess, in other words. I thought that was interesting wording. Um, the album influenced groups like the Association, the Mamas and the Papas, and Fifth Dimension, to name a couple. I even read that they believe that Queen and Supertramp were also influenced by this album.
Mhm. I think even
Um,
Weezer also took influence.
Weezer, maybe David Bowie. I think someone said, I don't know,
Yeah, David Bowie, Elton John.
Elton John. I'm sure you can say a lot of people are probably pretty influenced by this album, but yeah, just say that's how big this album is. Everybody kind of influenced by it. Jimmy Webb, who written a lot of
Yeah,
songs,
fame
in,
songwriter.
including "Up Up and Away" for Fifth Dimension, which won a Grammy for Song of the Year or something like that, and MacArthur's Park and all this. Anyways, he cited Pet Sounds as a benchmark in terms of inspiration and development into his sound as a songwriter, I guess. And it influenced Moody Blues' "Days of Future Past," is what I read.
Hmm.
Which I know you're a big fan of that album. So
Yeah, that's nice.
I don't know if you think that's true or not, but
I can see it.
that's what I read. So music journalist Andy Gill suggests that Pet Sounds inspired rock bands to get clever and experiment with orchestration and time signatures. So
Mm.
again,
Yeah.
it's just groundbreaking in all of those things. I think, I guess, and that's all the quotes I'm going to quote you. But I just think it's interesting to hear from all these historians, like exactly what they thought of this, this album, why it's a big deal. And again, I think it comes down to the production value. The production, maybe, I don't know, that might be the number one thing. I almost always, I think every producer always looks at this as like, yeah, we want to do something like what he's doing on this album.
Hmm.
So I think the
I would
production
say
value is
so.
just very groundbreaking for its time. I think the way he
Hmm.
produced the album, with all the experimentation sounds, orchestra, and even things like you said, module, whatever, uh,
Module, yeah. Module recording.
module recording, doubling, what's that? It said time signatures, all these things, kind of go into that. And then the second thing I think is the vulnerable, what I call vulnerable. I don't know. There might be, vulnerable introspective lyrics. Um, I think that's what I come with. I guess if we're gonna boil it down to why this album's so big, why is
Yeah,
this is a game
vulnerable.
changer?
Yeah, you said vulnerable. And then what was the other word you said?
Introspective
Introspective, and also I would also add relatable in there
and
as well.
relatable. Okay, good. Yeah, so I think I pointed that as why we talk about this album today and why it's number two or number one on a lot of lists or whatever.
Mhm.
You know, people look back at this album 60 years later. We look back at this album. Um, in fact, this is, and we talked about it, it felt like this album wasn't considered that big of a deal when it came out, though.
Not re Yeah, especially here in America, it wasn't seen as like a important album. I've known it was more well received in England,
In
which
England, okay,
makes sense now, given what came after. But yeah, it took a while, it took a bit.
yeah,
It took, 'cause, it wasn't that big. Again, most fans here in America were used to their surf stuff, and so they're so used to that. Then you get Pet Sounds, they're like, "What is this? This is not what I remember them for." So
yeah,
people kind of slept on it for a bit, but yeah, like I
yeah.
said, it wasn't until many years later it got a lot more reappraisal from a lot of people, and of course, like we already mentioned, a lot of people cite this as an influence. It's kind of why it's now seen as one of the greatest albums ever made.
It sounds like it started getting more credit in the '90s, is what my research was, which is kind of crazy. I mean, you're talking, decades of like not getting the credit. And then it was like 1994, Colin Larkin's all-time top 1,000 albums list listed at number three, and then in 2000 he relisted at number 18. In 1998, Pet Sounds was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. In 2004, the Library of Congress preserved Pet Sounds in the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. By 2006, over 100 publications recognized the album as one of the greatest. So it feels like it seems like a long time before we, like I said, it wasn't until I saw that Rolling Stones album list, the 500 greatest albums, I was like, oh, this must be a big deal. Number two, like, wow. That's, because you think Beach again, because I think of Beach Boys, I think of very fun, upbeat songs about surfing or about cars and all this, and it's a fun group and stuff like that. And Pet Sounds isn't really that so much. Maybe Sloop John B more than the other songs. Um,
Yeah.
uh, it's funny because I read that they think Sloop John B helped was like a precursor to yacht rock because it has a
Yeah, well,
nautical
they're about
theme
boats.
about boats. Yeah, because it has a nautical theme to it. I was like, yeah, that's true. I guess it was kind of yacht rock before yacht rock, I guess in a sense. Um, so yeah, so I mean, 100 publications. It wasn't until 2006 that it was like, according to what my research, that really blew up. But I mean, I was looking at, I got this list up here. In '93, the Times put number one. Musical Express, it put number one. '95, Mojo, number one. '97, The Guardian, number six. 2000, Virgin, number 18. 2001, VH1, number three on their list of greatest albums ever. 2002, BBC, number 11. Rolling Stone, 2003, number two. 2012, Rolling Stone, number two. 2020, Rolling Stones, number two. 2023, Rolling Stones, number two. What the heck? This is the craziest thing. When Rolling Stones first put that album list together, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was number one, Pet Sounds number two. And then in 2020, they decided to change it and they knocked off Sgt. Pepper's from the number one spot. And they put on What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. You
Mhm.
think Sgt. Pepper's probably got knocked to number two, right? No, Pet
No.
Sounds stayed. It's the craziest thing. It's the one album that didn't change at all through all of its. Every time they do it, they just, I don't know what it is about Pet Sounds. They're just like, yeah, we're not going to change that one. But
It's the definition of second best, I guess.
it's like a best. It's like maybe put it number one. Like I was thinking, like shouldn't it's been number two for so long? Maybe bump it up to number one of these days, or bump it to number three. But no, it's just like number two. We're just going to stick it there, and we're going to change everything around it. But I guess that just goes how big this album is. They're like Sergeant Pepper's, yeah, we'll throw that off. But Pet Sounds, no, we're not going to touch it. That's an album we will not touch. But anyways, but I looked through all these 2016 Uncut number one, uh, Paste 2024 number 10. I mean, so you can look through all these lists. It's a top album on all these lists. But I just think it's interesting that it didn't really get the recognition until 90s 2000s era, and still stays on
Mhm.
strong today. Um, Chris Smith's 2009 book, 101 Albums That Changed Popular Music, characterized Pet Sounds as one of the most innovative recordings in rock and transformed Wilson from talented band leader to studio genius. I like that
Yeah,
quote.
this is yeah, this yeah, this is where it's this album where the whole Brian Wilson's a genius started.
I was going to say, that's what we look at when we look back at this album, I think. Unfortunately, I guess not to discredit the other band members, are integral to Beach Boys, probably. But it's like Brian Wilson's the one you're going to talk about. It's like you said, he's kind of considered now a genius, and he wasn't considered that probably at this time.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
I
it wasn't
mean,
until later that
the
he
whole
got his
Brian Wilson's yeah,
recognition.
the whole Brian Wilson's a genius thing actually was part of the England marketing.
Oh, okay,
Like that's how they marketed in England. But yeah, in America, they didn't do that at all. It was like
no,
kind of because think about their advertisements back then. Here in America, they always had this very cheap, this very upbeat, very happy-go-lucky, very like I don't know how you say like very clean sort of approach. But in the UK, they kind of try to put a little edge to them, try to
okay,
wipe off a little bit of that squeaky clean sort of image that they had. You know, when they first started, they just had those striped, those plaid shirts on
yeah,
and just smiling.
yeah,
So yeah, so again, going back to another reason why it didn't really do much here in America because they didn't market it properly.
they didn't market it. Oh, because they didn't believe
Yeah,
in it, maybe, or
yeah, they didn't really because again, the
mm,
record label really wants the surf stuff because that's
yeah.
what worked before. So I'm sure it'll work still.
That stuff was kind of on its way out by '66, though,
It
probably.
it was, and and some I guess Brian knew that because he was kind of
Yeah,
getting tired of
yeah,
writing surf songs and car songs.
I think so. Saying that, I do like the surf songs,
I mean, no, oh yeah,
but
of course they're classics. It's summer right now. Of course you're gonna hear them.
but yeah, it's sad that we never get another Pet Sounds out of Brian Wilson. It feels like this is the
Yeah,
pinnacle of his career, I guess, in some senses. Um, Unless you disagree, I don't know. The Brian
not
Wilson
on the
album, I
same
think, is
level as
actually
this ever again.
not this level.
Hmm.
I've heard Brian Wilson's solo album. It's actually pretty good. Um,
Yeah,
I was
so
surprised. I was
very
kind of
pleasant.
surprised by it. I was like, wow, I didn't realize he was still had it in him, that kind of thing. Because it's way later when he does the Brian Wilson solo album with what's it called? I think it's called Love and Something.
Love and Mercy,
Love and Mercy. That's a good song. Anyways, so it's
yeah,
like, yeah,
and a
Brian
good
Wilson's
movie, which
and a
definitely.
good
So
movie.
yeah, Love and Mercy. Go watch that movie.
Oh, a great biopic, great musical biopic.
Yeah,
That really
it goes
explains a
into
lot of what's going
details on
on.
the recording. Yeah, it
Yeah.
goes into the recording of Pet Sounds and what led
Yep.
to
Goes right
his
into Pet
mental
Sounds
instability.
and the mental problems he kind of has at that point. But man, he still could write some good songs, even with all that mental stuff going on. Again, it feels like it was not till, and of course, he just passed away this last year, I think.
Hmm.
Brian Wilson, and one of the greats. Now we consider it. I'm glad we kind of got around to considering that. Now that I look back at it, because man, he did a lot, in such a short amount of time. Um, and it's almost kind of an unfortunate, what happened to him, I guess, in some senses. But
Hmm.
he was still touring, even as later in his years, he was still going out there and touring. So he was still getting people to listen to his music, which was kind of cool. Um, Anyways, but that's all I got for my notes on that. I think we've declared that this is a game changer from all that.
Yeah.
um, Definitely an
Then,
album we would recommend to everybody to listen to.
yeah, I would say so. And in the beginning, I mentioned when people react to this album for the first time, you either get the people who get it right away, and then
Mm.
those people who didn't get it on the first listen. And I can
It
understand why maybe
takes,
it
yeah,
wouldn't click right away. And
yeah.
there's many factors. Again, people came in with an expectation of the Beach Boys. Again, they probably knew them for the surf stuff, so they really were not prepared for something as this. But also the fact that I feel like some of those people don't quite fully understand just how groundbreaking it was, and some of the music they probably listened to probably wouldn't be like that if it weren't for this album.
They don't even know, yeah.
Yeah, don't really quite grasp just how important it was, especially people, especially Beatles fans. Funny enough, I've seen people react to the Beatles and they think so highly of them, and then they listen to Pet Sounds and they're
Yeah.
like, okay, it's cool, but nowhere near like Beatles level. Like, I don't know why people were recommending this album or stuff like that. But again, hopefully those type of people, maybe they'll eventually come around and they'll realize it's definitely is deserving of the praise it gets.
It probably takes a couple listens. I would agree with that.
Yeah, could.
It took me a couple listens. I know Scott, he loves this album, and he didn't like it at first.
Yeah.
He said it took him a couple listens. So it's kind of funny. Me and Scott had the kind of same experience where like we didn't get it, and then we're like, we get it now. But so did you think you got it at first?
Yeah, I think I got because again, the lyrics
Okay,
really
spoke
hit.
to
So
you.
that's kind of it's what
They
helped me.
literally hit. Yeah, yeah. What hits for me is just those melodies, and like I said before, but there's even
Mhm.
parts where
And
he's
this
just
is coming from
going,
somebody who's not really a lyric guy.
"You aren't."
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay,
Because
interesting.
unlike you, I care about the melody and the music.
Yeah,
Like
I'm kind of that way.
I almost rarely pay attention to the lyrics unless there's something about it that catches my attention.
There's this one song I just remember, just you listen to it and he goes into this ah, I can't do it correctly maybe, but he's just doing that and it's like, oh, that sounds so cool.
Yeah, oh
Like,
yeah.
like it's so kind of pretty, and like the melody behind it, and it's like I can just listen to them do that and just harmonize together. And God Only Knows is the greatest harmony song maybe of all time. Just that God only knows what a God only, like the way they did the rounds.
Mhm.
God only knows, God only I love it so much. That's my favorite part of the song. But yeah. But yeah, so that's my our review of the album and its significance in rock music. Thank you so much, Bryer, for joining me on that. And I really love hearing your thoughts on the album. Really helps me out, especially some of the technical issues I don't understand quite as much.
I
um,
don't fully get them either, but I try.
yeah, yeah, I'm thankful for that. And I think hopefully this is a a pretty good review of, hopefully get a good idea of why this is. I really want to get across why this is such a big album in history, I guess, in a sense. Not only is it's an album we love to listen to, but also I love thinking about the historical significance as well. So yeah, so I hope everybody enjoys that review of an album that's been reviewed many times, but I still felt like especially 60 years now, 60-year anniversary, it seems like it's a good time to review it and kind of really talk about hopefully all the aspects of it as much as I can. I can't talk about the chords progressions. I'm like, I don't understand any of that. Augmented chords. I don't know what that is, but yeah. Uh, Major chords, minor chords. I don't
It
know,
sounds good.
but
That's it. That's all that
it sounds
matters.
smart. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. But yeah, so thanks so much. Anybody watching, please comment. What do you think about Pet Sounds and its significance to you and all that, anyways? And yeah, for me and Brian, just thank you so much for watching, and we will see you later.